Hello, everyone, and good afternoon. I'm just going to wait just a second before we get started so that we can make sure everybody gets in on their Zoom. So thank you for joining. We are recording today. I'm hoping to record this and then post it to the website as a reference. So we will be recording this afternoon. All right, again, for those of you joining, I'm just going to wait a second to make sure everybody's able to get in on the Zoom before we get started. Okay, and while we wait for just a second, I'm kind of curious just to know how many of you all are first-time registrants in the system. If you're able to raise your hand or press *9 so I can see who's first time. Okay, I see you. Great. Okay, perfect. Thank you. And so I'm assuming the rest of us are, we've already done sort of the basics of the registration, and we're looking to see how we just update our information and resubmit for our annual registration. So I'll make sure to point out some different things along the way for everyone. Okay, great. I think we'll go ahead and get started. Okay, so again, thank you for joining. We will be going over rental property registration. This will be sort of an interactive workshop, as interactive as we can get over Zoom. And today is February 16th. So just before we start, as a reminder, city staff is not able to offer any legal advice, but we can offer sort of tips and best practices and an overview of the city's actions regarding the CSFRA. So my name is Andrea Kennedy. I will be the only city staff person with us today giving this presentation and tutorial, but we do have a full team. So we have Patricia Black, who sort of runs our petitions and things like that. Anki Van Dursen, who is our program manager. Joanne Pham, who is charging up our Eviction Help Center. And Jessica Spikes, who is our secretary. And the webinar will work this afternoon, that I will be giving the presentation and running you through the tutorial, and you all can ask questions. You can use the Q&A or the raise hand feature. I like to keep it pretty casual for these tutorials. So anytime we run across anything you have a question about, go ahead and raise your hand or type it in the Q&A. I like to address it a little bit more quickly and less structured than some of our other webinars, so that we can address it while we're looking at that part of the system and before we move on and it gets lost. And just since we are on Zoom, and I've been having a pretty good internet day, but in case my internet shuts down or kicks me off, just everybody log back in and we'll pick up right where we left off. It has happened once before during the Landlord webinar last year. Okay, so our agenda for the afternoon is to do a very brief review of the CSFRA and the rental housing fee. And then we'll talk a little bit about the property registration. We'll go into things that you should be registering and updating. We'll talk about fee exemptions, and then we'll jump right into the tutorial where I will go on the website and show you how that looks. Okay, so are there any questions about that before we get started? Did anybody have any questions I'm making sure they're in the right spot. I think we're okay to get started. So let's quickly review the CSFRA. So the long name for it, if you don't know, is the Community Stabilization and Fair Rent Act. We sort of abbreviate that and just say CSFRA, or we call it rent stabilization. So this was a voter-approved measure that was meant to stabilize the community by reducing housing turnover in certain rental units. And it does that in three main ways. So it stabilizes the rent, so that's sort of where we get those rent limits, or the amount of, or the percent of rent that we can increase every year on our units. We also have our eviction protections. So it put in place just cause evictions. There are 9 reasons that a landlord would be able to evict a tenant. And then finally, we have that the law will ensure a fair rate of return for the property owner on their investment. And it manages that process through a petition process. So who's covered? So most multifamily rental properties in Mountain View are covered as long as they were built before December 23rd, 2016. And that is the date that the law went into effect. We have 2 different types of covered units in the city. We have fully covered rental units and partially covered rental units. Fully covered rental units must abide by both the rent stabilization component of the law and the eviction protection component. And so this includes buildings that were built before 1995, which is the majority of multifamily units in Mountain View. And then multifamily properties generally with 3 or more units. And so that would exempt duplexes and single family homes. And if the property is government or a subsidized rental unit, it is also exempt. So with our partially covered units, only the eviction protection portion of the CSFRA would apply. And so those would be buildings that were built between 1995 and the start date of the law, which is the December 23rd, 2016 date. And then same thing, multifamily properties, exempting duplexes, and also exempting government subsidized properties. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the rental housing fee, which I'm sure most of you have on your mind since that was mailed out just in the beginning of January. So the CSFRA requires that landlords pay an annual fee, and this is established by our Rental Housing Committee, and it is to fund the reasonable and necessary expenses of implementing the law and the program. So it pays for things like the program itself, your staff, it pays for our third-party contractors, so our legal counsel, our hearing officers that oversee our petitions, any of our outreach, our open office hours, our eviction help center that's open to landlords and tenants. It also funds the rental housing helpline and our workshops and clinics. So the Rental Housing Committee adopts a budget for each fiscal year. So this year we adopted a budget. We take that budget and then we divide it by the number of covered units in the city. So this year our annual fee is $102 per unit. And that fee was due January 31st, 2022. If you did not pay by that day, you may have received a delinquent notice, which I think went out about the February 1st. So you can see just a chart here that shows what the fees have been. So if you look back in 2019, it was $124. We have been trying to make the fee less every year. In 2021, we did try to cut the fee by a larger amount because we were trying to take into consideration property owners and the effects that COVID may have had with their ability to collect rent. So we tried to lower that fee a little bit more so it wouldn't be such a burden on our property owners. And this is just a screenshot of what your fee looks like. If you'll notice sort of up here in the top right, we have our phone numbers for finance, the multifamily housing department, which is run through our fire department, and then our program here at the bottom. You'll notice that we charge our fee along with multifamily housing inspection, since they get billed at the same time and to basically the exact same properties. We thought we would combine the fees. All right, so I did see we had a question. The question is asking, will we be able to get a copy of the PowerPoint? Most definitely. So we will send you a copy of the PowerPoint to everybody who's registered today. And my hope is to get the PowerPoint and the recording up onto the website as well. Thank you for that question. Any other questions? Let me check for hands. If you're calling in, you can dial *9 to raise your hand. Okay, I see no questions, so let's keep going. All right, property registration. All right, so the Rental Housing Committee did adopt a mandatory property registration. Last year was our very first year that the registration was mandatory. So this is our second year. So annual registration is due by February 1st of each year. And if you have any exemptions that you need to file, you also must file those annually. So that would be due again by February 1st of each year. So the unit exemptions that you can apply for, if you are the owner and you are occupying one of your units, you can file an exemption for that. Or if you have an immediate family member who occupies the unit, so that would be your parent, your sibling, your child, and I believe your grandparent who is able to occupy the unit, and you can file an exemption for that. Each exemption that you file, you can reduce your fee by that unit amount. So this year it'd be $102 per unit. The other thing that is required in the registration is to update certain information within 30 days of the event happening. So whenever there's a new tenancy at your property, or if there is a tenancy that was terminated, or if there has been any change in owner or management contact information, you want to make sure to log in and update that information within 30 days of it happening. Also, through the registration, you can file your online notices. So any termination notices, any termination follow-up notices, banked rent increase notices, or tenant buyout agreement documentation, that can all be uploaded through the registration portal, and I'll show you how to do that when we get into the tutorial. All right, I see a couple questions. I'm going to jump into this next slide, and then we'll take a break for questions. So I always like to quickly talk about termination notice follow-ups because that's relatively new. And that was passed by our Rental Housing Committee, I believe this sometime last year. And it expands some noticing requirements. So our landlords must file certain copies of notices to the Rental Housing Committee. So of course, has been our termination notices. Anytime you serve a termination notice to your tenant, you have 3 days to file a copy with the Rental Housing Committee or file a copy and upload it online. What is new is that now, if there has been a summons, a complaint of unlawful detainer, or a judgment for an unlawful detainer against one of your tenants, You must also upload and file that paperwork and documentation with the committee within 7 days of serving that to your tenant. So that's new. If you have any UD paperwork, you want to upload that. If it goes further and you get an actual judgment by the courts, you want to make sure you upload that. And then finally, the Rental Housing Committee requires written notice to them if a tenant vacates because they either received a termination notice or there was an action for an unlawful detainer served against them. So sometimes you'll serve a 3-day notice to pay rent or quit on the tenant. It doesn't necessarily go all the way to UD court, but the tenant receives the notice and says, I'm going to move out. And so if that is the case, then just a written notice, which you can do online, and just letting us know, I served a termination notice and the tenant did move out. Right. So you can actually just go to the online website, mvrent.mountainview.gov, and upload that. Let me know if there's any questions about that, because that's kind of new. Okay, let me cover this. So this is just a screenshot of the rent portal. So again, the website is mvrent.mountainview.gov. And then on the left-hand side here, you'll see the different types of things that you can do there. So you can manage multiple properties. If you are a landlord that has more than one rental property in Mountain View, you can do it all under the same username and password. Update all of your contact information. This is where you apply for those exemptions. And then again, this is where you want to submit all those required notices. And there's a list over here, and I'll get more into detail when we jump into the tutorial. All right, so let's take a little pause. So the first question is asking, is this for multifamily only, or it also includes single family? So generally speaking, single family houses are exempt from the CSFRA. With that being said, that qualifies only as single family houses that are on an individual parcel or plot of land by themselves. If you are one of those sort of oddities in Mountain View where you have a parcel of land and maybe it has 3 separate single family homes on it, that would be covered under the law. If you had one parcel of land, there was a duplex and a single family, the single family is covered and the duplex is not. There are reasons for that, but I don't want to get too deep into those oddities if that's not your situation. So I hope that answers that question. If not, go ahead and ask a follow-up, or you can raise your hand. And I see another question. Does the rent registry apply to properties built in 2019? So for the newer properties, if you're one of them, we do like to get at least the property address and some contact information in the system for the landlord, but it's not something you'll have to go in every year and upload unit information and keep it up to date. No, because you would not be covered under the CSFRA. So if that is your situation, I can just reach out to you separately. I'll take down your name. Perfect. All right, and thank you everyone for your patience with me as I navigate the website and this presentation. All right, I don't see any more questions. I don't see any hands. So let's talk a little bit more about exemptions before we jump into the tutorial. All right, exemptions. So as I sort of mentioned before, CSFRA exemptions will reduce your rental housing fee by $102 per unit. So like I said, the rental housing fee for this year is $102. So that's what would be reduced by a per unit exempt basis. So unit, and of course, unit exemptions must be filed every year. So we have two different types of exemptions. We have property exemptions, which would exempt the entire property from the CSFRA. And then we have our unit exemptions. Most of our property exemptions, I'm pretty sure all of them are already accounted for, and these would include properties that are built after the law went into effect, and then government or subsidized rental properties. So we can file your property as exempt if it falls into one of those categories. Most of the exemptions we'll be talking about today are going to be unit exemptions. So with the unit exemptions, that would be an owner-occupied unit or an immediate family member occupies the unit. Or if you're one of those odd properties that I discussed, if you have a duplex on your property, that would also be exempt. Okay, so let's get into the tutorial. Unless we have any other questions, I'll sort of just keep my eye out there on the bottom of the screen. And again, like I mentioned, just raise your hand or type your question as we go along, and I'll jump more into detail at any section where anybody has more questions. All right, so let's talk about creating an online account. Since I know we have a couple new users, we'll want to start right at the beginning. So to log into the website, you're going to use mvrent.mountainview.gov. So you're going to type that into the, I think it's called the URL search box at the top of the internet. And the other thing that we also have for you all is a user guide. It's just a step-by-step user guide, and it has pictures on it, so it sort of walks you through the entire process. You can access that at mountainview.gov/rent stabilization/registration guide. And it looks exactly like this PowerPoint, but just in a PDF form. All right, so once you go to the website, you'll see the homepage will look just like this. And you can click in as the landlord. Once you do that, it'll get you to a login page. If you're brand new, you want to go ahead and create a new account. So you click, would you like to create an account? If you are not new, you would just type in the email address you used to create your account and the password that you made. All right, however, for our first-time users, we would have to start some registration information. So you want to start with your first name, last name. You can put your phone number in there if you wish. Again, you're going to type in your email, and this is going to be the email you want to use to access this portal. So I will say this because it does come up sometimes. There are properties that have an owner and maybe a property manager or two, and only one email address can claim a property. So if you find yourself in that situation, what many people have done is to either create an email account that everyone can share as their login, or if you have sort of a generic property email address, use that as your email account address, and then create a generic password that people can log in with. All right, so do that, and then we must choose a password. So the password has to be between 8 and 16 characters. It has to contain a capital letter and at least one number. Once you do that, click on the submit, and you'll see this green pop-up say email verification pending. So that means you need to go over to your personal email that you used to create the account. You'll come here to this CAP support@3disystems.com. And then in order to verify your account, we want to click on this link here. to activate your account. Click that. You'll see this screen pop up. Account has been activated successfully. And then you can click on this little go home button, and it bumps you right back to the login page where you can now use your username and password to log in. Okay, and I will now hop over to the internet. Okay, so let's log in. And this is just our test account, so all the information you'll see on here is made up. And I will be doing the same thing for this tutorial. Okay, so this is what my profile will look like. As you can see, I have a ton of properties that I've claimed. But for the purposes of this tutorial, I'm just going to start fresh and claim a new one. All right. So once you click on the Add Property button, that should be in the top left of your property profile, this pop-up will come up that says Add Property. So you want to type in your APN and PIN number combination. And where you want to find that is on your actual invoice. Each property has its own personalized PIN number. So if I click on this little link here, where to find APN and PIN, you'll see on our invoice, underneath the description area where it says Community Stabilization and Fair Rent Act rental housing fee, there will be an APN and PIN number for you. Oh, good question. Okay, I have a question here asking, what do you mean by updating registration annually? All right, so to answer that question, once you add in your property information, which I'm going to show you how to do quickly, that information will save in the system. And every year, between January and February 1st, you have to go into the system, review all the information, make sure it's all up to date, edit anything that needs changing, that maybe you hadn't been doing on that monthly basis. Enter in your exemptions again, and then just go ahead and click submit and review and submit that to the city. So the big push is going to be the first time that you enter in the information. And then after that, it's really just maintaining that it's up to date, maintaining that your rent numbers are correct for each unit, and then resubmitting that information on a yearly basis. And I hope that makes sense. Let me know if that was clear. And I'll try to point it out too when I get to that point. So for those of us who are first-time users, we do have to add the property. You only have to do this once, but we do have to do it. So we're going to go ahead and look at our invoice to get our APN. And then we're going to get our PIN number from our invoice as well. Once we do that, we'll click verify. An address will come here, and we want to make sure that is the address to our property. If that is correct, then we can go ahead and submit. If we have a property name that we want to use, we can type that in and give our property a nickname. Okay, so once we do that, we'll have all of our properties here. I need to just find my property. And I'll click into that, and our property profile will come up for this address. I will apologize in advance if this is not the picture that is your property. This pulls straight from Google, and it is not always correct. Okay, so once we're here, there are some pieces of information that are required before we can submit our registration. You'll see them here, our unit count, our owner contact, and our manager contact. So those three things. I personally always like to start with contact information. So that's where I'm going to go ahead and start. Up here are different tabs that you can click through. Let me click on contact information. Over to the right is where pretty much all of our action buttons are going to be. So if there's something you need to do, look over to the right on your screen. So we will add contact. Also, I like to start with owner. So let's do that. Date of initial occupancy. So that is pretty much the date that the building was built. Technically, it is the date that the building is first able to be occupied by tenants. Usually those are very close together. So I will go ahead and do before February 1st, 1995, since that is the case for most of our properties in Mountain View. And then I'll move over to business information. So owner type, I'll go ahead and say individual. Date of most recent property title change, so you can use a chart. If you click up here, it'll skip around for the years. January 1st. Year purchased or transferred. Many times they are the same date, sometimes they are not. But that depends on your personal property information. Preferred contact method, so email, address, or USPS or snail mail. You can choose both, or you can choose one. And then make sure to scroll down to complete all the information. There is a scroll bar here in case you don't have one of the rolly things on your mouse. There we go. If your street address and your mailing address are the same, you can save some time and click the same as home address button, and it auto-populates for you. If they're different, of course, type in the information you have. Once you're done, go ahead and click add. And you'll see that information pops up here. And we also, of course, need to add in our manager information. So for some of our bigger properties, that will be two different people from your owner and the manager. If you do it yourself, you can save some time by clicking the same as owner button, and it pops all the information in there for you. And then you can just click whichever method of contact you prefer and click add. Okay, so that's for our first time users. If you've never done this before, you have to go in and put this in. For all of you who already have done this before, you will already have this information in your system, but you want to make sure you log in, click on this tab, make sure all this information is still accurate and correct. If something's changed, if you have a new manager, if you moved and you have a new mailing address, update that information. And you'll do that by going over again to the right when we want to do an action. And we click on this action menu here. And you just go to edit, or if you want to start over, you can click delete. But if you click edit, you can just go in there, update any information, and click update. And of course, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. So this is all that is required in your contact information section. There is another option if you want to add a contact where you can click other, and type in somebody's information and the relationship they have to you or to the business. I have had where if someone owns a fourplex and it is a family and they each have partial ownership, and so they wanted to add everybody's information in there, and so they utilize that other option to get everybody in there. Okay, so that is contact information. Pretty straightforward. So once you're done with that, we're going to go back to the addresses tab. And we will move on to start updating our unit information. Okay, so if you sort of look around, I'll show you a couple little neat things. So here's the picture of the property. Here are our site addresses. It's only going to include one site address. If you have more than one site address and you would like to make that distinction, you can go over to this add button and actually add another house address. So I'll just show you what it looks like because it's kind of cool. If you have a larger property and more than one building with different addresses. You can add it in. Oops, did I do everything? No, no. Oh no. I guess it was me. I was missing something. Okay, change that. Oh, there we go. I was missing that. That'll do it. Okay. Okay, so now we have two site addresses. And if you scroll down, it'll break it up for you. So you can have one section and enter in all the unit information for that one house address. And then if you have another one, you can enter all the unit information for that building address. So it keeps it a little bit neat in that way. Okay, so let's start with our 1005 High School Way building. So there's two ways. Again, if you look all the way over to the right, that's our action buttons. There's two ways you can upload unit information. You can do add multiple units, or you can add your units individually. My property here is small, so it has 3 units. So I'm going to add them individually. So I'll click add unit, enter my unit number, select my occupant. Let's say this is a tenant. We'll select the number of bedrooms, 2, bathrooms, 1, move-in date. Let's go to 2020, February 1st. Date of last rent increase. So this one, there's a trick to it in a way. If you have given a rent increase, just go ahead and put the date of your rent increase. If you have not given a rent increase, so let's say, for example, my tenant moved in 2 weeks before the world shut down from COVID. So I did not give a rent increase yet. My date of last rent increase would basically not exist because I haven't given one. So if that's the case, we are going to use the move-in date. So you'll just put, again, the move-in date as the date of your last rent increase. And then you'll put your current rent amount, last monthly rent increase amount. So if you've given one, again, put it in. If you haven't, you want to make sure you put a 0, okay? And then again, same thing here with the last monthly rent increase percentage. If you gave one, I think what this year is 2%, you would put in the percentage amount. If you have not given one, then you would put 0. If you need a little bit of help calculating the percentage, you can click this little link here to calculate percentage. It sends you to a percentage change calculator. So you just type in the amounts there and it should show you what your percentage change is. So that's nifty. And that's all that's required. You'll see the little red star next to the things that are mandatory. We do have this rent history section that's boxed off here. That's not required, but it can be a tool if you want to use it to keep track of your tenants and the base rents and their rent increases, but it's not required. So if you just want to fill out the top part, you can click Add. And you'll see that it will populate into the chart. All right. So we can do that. I think that's pretty straightforward. If anybody has questions about that, go ahead and ask. I'm not going to spend more time on it because I think it makes sense. So just go ahead and add in your unit numbers, the occupant, and the requested information. Add it in, and you'll see it'll populate here. If you have a bigger property, you might want to go to the Add Multiple Units button where you can download a spreadsheet. If you click Download Fillable Spreadsheet here. Oops, sorry, that is a different thing. This is the spreadsheet that will pop up. There's an example line. Delete that before you upload it. But you'll add in the unit number, the tenant, the bedroom, and just the same information. I will just sort of do a disclaimer that you want to make sure that it's formatted exactly as the example before you upload. Otherwise, you will run into some issues. If you are having some trouble doing that, you can email me and I can help you format it. We did learn this year that you can only use that Add Multiple Units button once for your initial upload, and then you're going to want to maintain as the year goes on any rent changes or tenant changes because you're not going to be able to do it again the next year and override the information. So try to keep up with that if you have a larger property. Okay, so let me just add the last unit really quickly so that we can move forward. Manager. Now we have all 3 of my units. And then you'll notice sort of when I did that, all of my little exclamation point tasks have gone away because I did everything that I had to do. I did see a question. This is a good question. Do you have a section for rent decreases? We do not. It is something that I do have on my list to work on. It is not something that we anticipated when we built the system, because who could have guessed that COVID would happen? But I'm gonna take another note and bring that up in my meeting with them, with our contractor next week. A lot of people have been sort of entering them in as just adjustments in the rent. But there's not anything that actually is allowed to do a negative number at the moment. So I do apologize for that. Okay, so once we do that, we have everything that we need to submit our registration. So if you're a first-time registrant, or if you have just logged in and this is what your profile looked like, and you have reviewed everything and you've updated everything, if you already have information there and you want to update, just go click on the action menu and click edit, and it will pop up here for you to edit. And so you just want to make sure everything looks good and up to date. Okay, looks like we have another question. And this is asking, if we're just now registering our property, would the $102 fee per unit be required ahead of adding the property unit? No, they are two separate things, but they are both due at the same time. So if you're just now getting to it, you can go ahead and pay your fee today, and you can get started on working on your property registration today or tomorrow, whatever suits you best. They are not exclusive to each other. You must do both things, but they are separate actions. Paying your fee is one thing, and registering your property is another thing. All right, so that's your basic information. So if you've done that, you'll notice a button will pop up that says review and submit. If this button doesn't pop up, then you're still missing something. And you might want to check right underneath this registration open. If you're still missing one of those tasks that were there in red with the exclamation point, complete that task, and then this button will pop up for you, and you can review and submit. And so that's probably most of us that are here today. If you are one of the people on the line who has a unit exemption, you're going to want to add that before you submit your property. So you'll go here to your unit section. You'll choose which unit you have an exemption to request. And then on that unit, as with all things in the system, you go all the way over to the right to where our action buttons are. You're going to want to click on the action menu. So let's say we want to request an exemption for unit number 3 because this is our child. So we'll click the action menu, not edit, not delete, but apply for exemption. So we'll click there and we'll get another pop-up. We want to enter the date that the exemption started. Let's say they've been there for a while since we bought it. This is our child. You can enter a comment. It's not required for a comment, but you can. And then we want to select our reason for the exemption. So duplex, not in this case. The owner or landlord's spouse, domestic partner, child, parents or grandparents now occupy the unit as their primary residence. So that would be us because it is our child. And the final option would just be the landlord occupies the unit. So if you are occupying it yourself, you would want to click this last one. Okay, the next thing it's going to ask is for you to upload a document, a supporting document that shows that this individual does live in this unit. So you're going to want to make sure it's something that has the individual's name on it, the address, and the unit number. We really want the unit number. So make sure it's that. Most people just use PG&E because it is very easy and it doesn't have any really private information on it. But if you have something else, you can use that as well. So we'll browse for something. These are my notes about this program, so that's fine to use. We'll upload that. And then we declare here under penalty of perjury that we are indeed telling the truth and that this is indeed our child. So we will submit that And then you'll notice right away the status of this unit changes to applied for exemption. So once it has been reviewed by staff and if it was accepted, then it will change again to exempt. And so the statuses keep up with each unit. And again, that resets every year. So you have to do these exemptions every year. The last thing I'll point out before we submit this is if you scroll all the way down, you'll see our case history here. And this shows all the activity that we've done on this property. So you'll see right at the top here, we've applied for a unit exemption for unit number 3. And we did that on February 16th. Right now, the unit exemption status is still open because it has not been reviewed by staff yet. If you want to look at your property and see what someone uploaded, say one of your property managers did this for you and you want to review it, you can click on the little eyeball and it just pops up a review of what the comments were, what exemption was selected, and then what document that you uploaded. Again, the action menu, you can look at it. It's just would be whatever picture that you uploaded there. Okay, so that is that. You'll see the same thing every year. A rent registry will be available as a case. You can see if you had submitted it the years prior and see sort of how on track you are. And once you're done with that, oh, I think we have a few questions. Okay, good question. So first question is, when is this due? This was due February 1st. So if you haven't started yet, get started on it. And if you need any help, go ahead and reach out to me. We can set up a private Zoom where we can pull up your personal profile and I can help walk you through it, or I can do it over the phone if you have some easier questions. And my email is, or phone number, I will list at the end of this presentation. Another question. We have a multi-unit property and 4 of the units are a duplex. Can we file for an exemption for those units? Great question. Yes, you can. Duplexes are exempt from the CSFRA. So if you have a property with duplexes, you can file exemptions for those. You would just click on the duplex option. Yes, I will type my information in the chat. Everybody can have that. Okay, so I don't see any more questions. So once we have all of our information, our exemptions are here, our contact information is here, our unit information is here, we are done. So we want to go all the way down, click this review and submit button. We will review. So if all your information looks good, your addresses, your owner, manager contact, the system auto-populates a little unit summary just of how many, a breakdown of how many 2-bedroom, 1-bedroom, 3 bedrooms you have. And then we'll have our unit information here. And again, our case history down here. If everything looks good and up to date, we didn't forget anything, click submit. You want to enter in your full name and your title. And again, penalty of perjury, that this is correct information. And submit. Successfully done. So that is it, that you are done, you have submitted. Staff will review your registration, and once it has been reviewed and accepted, we will change the status to registration complete, and this will be a nice green bar, so you'll know everything is good. So that's your registration. Once you've done that and you want to just maintain your information online, you always do that using the action menus next to each unit or next to the information that you want to change. So for an example, if we have unit 1 here and the tenant moved out, we want to click on the action menu. The edit button is going to be gone. So everything you do now until next registration cycle is going to just be an amendment or a change in occupancy. So if there's a change to the current occupant situation, you want to update their rent amount, you can do that by doing a current occupant amendment. If you want to change the occupant, you do a change in occupancy. And that just gives you a blank slate, and you can say it's vacant. You can say a manager moved in. You can say an owner moved in, or you can enter in a brand new tenant information, and you would just add that and enter that in and click add. That will go for staff review. Once staff reviews it and approves it, the new information will load in your chart. So that's to change and update your tenant information. If you would like to upload some of your required notices, again, it's in your action menu. You can do that by submitting these different required notices. So most commonly is going to be a termination notice. You would just enter in the tenant's name. A phone number is required. Email address optional if you have it. The date the notice was actually served to the tenant. So again, we want to make sure we follow that 3-day rule. So let's say we served it on Monday and we're uploading it today. So we made it. And then we want to select our reason. Most commonly is a 3-day notice to pay rent. And then we'll upload a copy of our termination notice. You want to just upload the whole thing. So if you have more than one page, especially I know during COVID and with some of our new noticing requirements, some of our termination notices were 3 or 4 pages long. Just upload the whole thing. And then you certify again, type in your name, and submit that. And then that qualifies as submitting a copy to the city. And you can do that with all your different required notices here. And again, of course, anything you do will pop up in your case history. So you'll be able to see, I submitted a termination notice on this day. And if you want to click into your details, all of your details are here. So that's your notices. That's how you edit your information for your unit. I think the last thing to sort of look at is if you want to edit your owner information. Again, it's this action menu. You can update your owner information, or if you sell your property, you can click new owner and list the date that you sold it. And then if you know the information for the new owner, you can type it in. If not, then we'll look it up on our end. But that just notifies us that you've sold the property. And that's that. Any questions before I sort of finish up and hop back over to the PowerPoint? Oh, great question. Can you explain what a banked rent increase is? Yes. So let's look at this. Is it in here? I think one of them was missing from my, here we go. Okay. So let's just look at the template, might be the easiest way to do it. So a banked rent increase is when you are using more than one of the allowed rent increases for any given year. So if you did not use a rent increase, a past rent increase, you can hold on to it and sort of put it in the bank and save it for another time. We're seeing a lot of that that happened during COVID. So a lot of people were not giving this 2.9% rent increase for 2020 because of COVID and sort of just trying to be mindful of their tenants and their rent increases. So let's say you were one of those landlords and you didn't use this 2020 banked rent increase. Well, now, if you have your 2021 annual general adjustment or rent increase, and you want to use that, and that's 2%, you can say, okay, I want to use my 2021 rent increase, and I want to use that 2020 rent increase that I had saved in the bank. So you can actually use them both at the same time for a total rent increase of 4.9%. And so you can download this form. There is a button, you can just click the template button in the system. We also have the form on our website. It's very easy to fill out. So you would fill in the current rent, you would fill out the 2% increase for this year and the 2.9% rent increase for last year. We will total that up as a total rent increase for 4.9%. We would do the math and we would get the new total. So that's a banked rent increase. So once you use it, you lose it. So you can only bank rent increases that you have not used in the past. I hope that makes sense. You don't have to use all of your rent increase either. So if it's this year and you only want to use 1%, you can use 1% and you can bank the other 1% for another year. You just want to make sure you keep good books on that, so you're very clear of what you're able to bank and what you're not. Oh, great, perfect. All right, and if you do a banked rent increase, you are going to want to upload that online here. If you just use the rent increase for this year, you don't have to upload that, but anything banked, you want to upload it. Okay, any other questions about the database or the website? You can use hands if you want to use hands. If you're on the phone, *9. Oh, there you are. Rita, I'm sorry if you had your hand up this whole time and I didn't see it. Did you have any other questions? I think maybe not. Okay, I don't see any, so I'm going to go out of here. I'm going to skip all of these, but you'll notice they're all step-by-step with pictures. That's what the user guide looks like. I just did that in person for you right now, but it is a good guide to use if you want to show a property manager. Okay. Okay, so let's hop back in. So yeah, just to review, once you finish your registration, you can definitely submit those notices. So that would be your termination notices within 3 days of serving it on your tenant, your termination notice follow-up, your banked rent increase notice, and any tenant buyout information. And all of those you want to do within 7 days of serving those notices on your tenant. Okay, so every year you'll get a postcard to remind you that registration is open. We try to send it out maybe late November, early December. And we open up registration usually mid-December, so some people can get a head start on it. That registration is going to be due every February 1st. And that is just how that goes. So expect that every year. And you're, of course, going to want to apply for your unit exemptions every year. So you'll notice right here, it'll sort of mention if you're a first-time user, do all those steps that we did. If you already have an account, log in, review, update, and resubmit. So those will be your steps. We'll quickly go over some resources before we end. We have the Mountain View Rental Housing Helpline that you can call at any time. If you have any questions about the CSFRA in general, we can sort of let you know how it works, walk you through the processes and things like that. You can also refer your tenants to it if they have any questions. We also have people who speak Spanish answering that line. All right, upcoming webinars. We have another one of these coming March 9th. So refer a friend if you know of another landlord who may need help. We have different types of office hours. We have our virtual office hours. Those are every Tuesday from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. And that's anything related to rent stabilization in the CSFRA. We also have the Eviction Help Center, where we are assisting people with applying for rent relief through the state program. We are helping both tenants and landlords. Some landlords are applying on their tenant's behalf after their tenant has applied to speed up the process. So we can help you with that if you need. And you can join us. It's every Tuesday from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Tuesdays is appointment only. And then we have Thursdays, which is fine to walk in. And that's 1 p.m. to 8 p.m. And that is mountainview.gov/eviction help clinics. Or you can just refer your tenants there if they need help with their rent. Our wonderful mediation program is entirely free for tenants and landlords in Mountain View. You don't have to live in Mountain View, but if you own property in Mountain View, it's totally free. We have our trained mediators who help with any sort of situation, tenant, landlord related, a lot of security deposit type things, maybe a noise complaint type of thing. It's 100% confidential, and we have a very high success rate of people coming to their own resolution if they sit down and put their brains together and talk it out. All right. So there is different type of rental assistance. We have, as I sort of mentioned, at the Eviction Help Center, the California COVID-19 Rent Relief Program. They can help up to 18 months of rent and 12 months of utilities. And that is at housingiskey.com. Or of course, just send them over to the Help Center and we can help them with that. The local CSA also has some rent assistance options. If the tenant is looking for local rent assistance options, they can contact CSA at finaid@csacares.com. We have, of course, a very high demand for these different community programs. So we will make sure we get back to everybody and help them as soon as we can, but patience can be required. All right, so legal resources for our landlords. You can find some help at the Santa Clara County Bar Association Lawyer Referral Service or Superior Court Self-Help Center. And this is my email again. So let's go ahead and see if we have any other questions. All right. I do see a question about tenant buyout agreements, so I'll go ahead and answer that. But I just wanted to say for those of you, we are past our hour by 10 minutes. So I appreciate everyone for coming. If you don't have any other questions, feel free to log off or feel free to stick around and I'll go ahead and finish up answering some questions. We will be following up with you to send you this PowerPoint and the link to the video. So look out for that. Contact me if you have any questions or if you're stuck anywhere on your registration. And again, I appreciate you for coming and have a great evening. Okay, I see we have a question about tenant buyout. So that's a good question. Let me go ahead and show you something. Okay, so if you go to our website, mountainview.gov/rent stabilization, you can look up forms and notices, landlords, tenant buyout. So tenant buyouts are a mutual agreement between the landlord and the tenant. This usually happens if for some reason the landlord is interested in having a unit vacant. They can offer the tenant financial incentives to vacate the unit voluntarily. Of course, as we know, with the just cause evictions in our law, there are very few and strict reasons that a landlord is able to terminate a tenant. So tenants have expanded rights to stay in the unit. So if a landlord is interested in that unit being vacant, maybe they're looking to sell the property, or it could be one of a million reasons. But if that's something that they're interested in doing, they have talked to their tenant and the tenant says, I'm kind of willing to move, if we can come to an agreement. So this is an avenue for tenants and landlords to look at that option legally within the confines of the CSFRA. So there is this form that you would have to fill out. It explains to the tenant what the tenant's rights are, that they do not have to accept this offer, that they do not have to move. It lets them know a base of what they would get if they were evicted for one of the reasons that require tenant relocation assistance. And so there's a chart down here that shows, how they would income qualify for that and what the minimum they would get. So oftentimes how it works in reality is that the buyout is usually larger than this amount. But again, it's just an agreement between the tenant and the landlord. So it could be less, it could be more, it could be a little more, it could be a lot more. It's up to you and your tenant. But yeah, it's totally a thing where you can agree on a price or on a benefit, and you would fill out this form and sign and date it, and then you would upload that to our website, this form, and then you would fill out some information letting us know what was the agreed upon date that the tenant is going to move and what was the benefit that was negotiated. So that's a tenant buyout agreement. Does that answer the question? Any other questions? Oh, perfect. Great. I'm not seeing any other questions. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and stop for the day. Again, I appreciate everyone for coming. Write down my email address or visit the website and you can find me there. mountainview.gov/rent stabilization is where we are at. So I appreciate everyone for coming. Have a great rest of the day and I might see you soon. All right, bye.